Welcome back to another episode of the United States of a Movie podcast, the movie podcast that makes Monday fun day, because it's the movie podcast for movie fans by movie fans, where every week we try to find one movie to represent each state in these United States, and I couldn't even fathom doing it alone. So of course I have my amazing co-hosts with me, Ryan Sandler, Will Hirsch. Welcome back.
Oh, it's great to be here, man. I think we picked some really steamy movies for this episode.
Just loving hanging out in my movie swamp.
Oh my God.
But also, special guest today, we won't be able to take on South Carolina alone. So now we officially get to crown our first all-star guest, because you're a returning guest. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Beth Troutman.
Hello!
Hello, Beth.
After like 45 minutes of tech issues and trying to figure out how to make microphones and headphones work, yeah. I'm here!
I'm definitely going to start an alternate podcast, which is just Beth trying to figure out how to do stuff on her computer, because that was 40 minutes of comedy.
Yeah.
It was actually really good. I'm not mad at it.
Oh, well, we were very entertained. Now, the state that we're taking down, or at least going to try to take down this week on the show, is South Carolina. Now, we had Beth on for the North Carolina episode. That was excellent. And you said, if we're doing South Carolina, we got to bring you back. So we did. In this particular case, though, we've switched things up a little bit differently. I picked a movie, Will and Ryan picked a movie, and you picked a movie, and I have to be honest, we had quite the selection. So the movie that I brought to the table is one that's really close to my heart. A movie that when I was younger very much kind of said, Ollie, you should move to America and live in a small town of like 1,000 people. And oh, that's exactly what I'm doing right now. The 1991 movie Doc Hollywood, Michael J. Fox, Julie Warner, Woody Harrelson, Bridget Fonda, directed by Michael Caton Jones, who's not a very familiar name, but directed Memphis Belle, one of my favorite movies, Rob Roy, and guys, a little connection to our California Challenge episode, he also directed Basic Instinct 2.
Oh God.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was a Basic Instinct 2.
Yeah, don't worry. It's
neither did Sharon Stone, and she's in it.
Yeah. And they both turned us down for this episode, so.
But it got even more interesting though, because Ryan, Will, you guys were kind of in a mind meld of what you wanted to do. The movie that just immediately, when you heard South Carolina, you went towards it. What is the movie that you guys brought to the table?
We pulled an almost like Wonder Twins Activate kind of situation where we both said the movie at the same time. And it was kind of like that bit in Step Brothers where they're like, did we just become best friends? Yeah. And oh boy, that was a mistake.
So
we picked Will, if you will.
Swamp Thing.
Yes.
Not Man Thing. Don't get confused with Man Thing.
The
which
original.
Is almost identical. Swamp Thing.
Not the sequel with Heather Locklear. The original.
Right. Yeah, the 1982 original, which I didn't realize, written and directed by Wes Craven, which was certainly fascinating, starring Adrienne Barbeau, Ray Wise, Louis Jourdan, and Dick Durock, which is the most porn star sounding name I've ever heard in my entire life.
Yes.
Thank you. That's the first thing that I thought. I was like, is this a porn version that I'm watching?
You could argue that the quality of this movie is late 80s porno quality.
It is.
Storyline, dialogue, all of it.
I'm completely nonsensical topless scene. You know, it's just like, you know what I want to do in this swamp? Get naked.
And this movie was rated PG.
It was. Well, there was actually it was when it was released in Europe, right? But then they accidentally released, when they did the DVD, the unrated international cut got accidentally printed. And it was years before some mum found out and said, made a complaint, and they had to reissue it in the early 2000s. Random fact I was reading on the internet.
They had to rotoscope Swamp Thing's genitals out of every shot. It was troubling.
So expensive.
Yeah.
But if you think that couldn't get any more horny. Troutman, I have to be honest, like all of your movie choices that you brought to the show so far do have a latent horniness to them. What is the movie that you brought to the table?
Well, I had options. One of the options was The Abyss, by the way, which I guess doesn't really represent South Carolina because it happens underwater and it's like sci-fi, but shot in South Carolina. I also brought The Notebook to the table.
And we were like, no. Screw that. Move
That's
on.
not what the fans want. They want obscure nonsense.
Instead,
Everyone's talked about the Notebook.
I love that Beth is already, and if you're listening at home, the reticence with which Beth is like on her face right now, she doesn't want to like admit she's seen this movie, but at the same time, it is. I can't wait to talk about it. Come on, bring it on. I never even heard about this movie until you mentioned it.
Never.
Oh, and I saw this movie in the theater when I was a kid.
Of course you did.
It's called Shag. It's not the British kind of shag, Ollie. It is a beach dance that was started so that people could dance and hold a cocktail in their hand at the same time.
Oh, okay. Well, so look, I mean, let's be honest, because last time you also brought Dirty Dancing. This is kind of like...
Is there a theme?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it's exactly the same plot. A bunch of teenage girls, and it's not quite filthy Dirty Dancing. It's like, it's like missionary position dancing, I guess. It's like...
Yeah. Real vanilla dancing. Yeah.
For those of you that haven't seen it, which is probably, I mean, quite a few of you, it's a 1988 movie directed by Zelda Barron. But it stars my teen crush, Phoebe Cates. Still, honestly, Phoebe, if you're watching this, hit me up. She's just the most amazing. Bridget Fonda again. So she's in 2 of our movies.
Yeah.
And by the way, she's the same character in both of these
pretty
movies.
much.
I just had to put that out there.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Pretty much.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Identical. No, don't worry. Then we've got Annabeth Gish as the morbidly obese character Pudge.
Disgusting.
Horrifying to look at.
You boys.
And Paige Hannah. Yeah, but we got to get into that because all of us are on the text thread going, what the hell is going on with this fat character? Like, everybody calls her Pudge. You know what? We're doing it. We're going to start with Shag. Let's get into it. We're talking Shag right now.
Good idea.
We're talking Pudge right now.
We're going to talk.
Her name is literally Pudge, and I texted you guys where I'm like, she is the same size as Phoebe Cates. She is a size 2 at, like, Wet Seal.
It's crazy.
So I don't understand, like, what they're talking about in this movie.
It is...
I couldn't understand it was trying to make a point, or if like, I genuinely don't know.
What was weird to me is that it's like it's kind of like those stories like She's the Man or something, or like what's the one where it's like it's the ugly girl that's actually pretty, that she takes off her glasses.
She's all that.
She's all that.
My
she combs her
crush,
hair, and it's like, oh, there was a pretty girl inside. It's like it's the fat girl who had to realize she was a skinny girl the entire time, and when she realizes it, so does everyone else. Yeah. I'm like, it was some magic spell of some kind. It was so peculiar.
This movie gave me an eating disorder. I mean, it opens with like, this first of all, just to say, like, I'd never heard of this movie, and it's not an easy movie to find. Like, Will, you had to go on an excursion to get a DVD of it, right?
I literally went to a video rental store. We still have them in LA, and my favorite video store just reopened, and I like that on Thursday, and I was like, hey, I need to find this specific movie, and they had it.
I was looking everywhere for it. It is unrentable. It is unfindable. I eventually found someone had uploaded it in 2 parts to Daily Motion. And there was like a 40-minute and then a 50-minute. But it was, and maybe I hate this movie a bit more because every 8 minutes there was a minute and a half of adverts, and it was all Verizon. So
that's actually the Zelda director's cut of Shag.
By
that's
the
how she
end,
uploaded it.
By the end of it, I've never hated a company more in my life. I'm so angry because I'm just trying to get through. There's even 5 minutes left in the movie. Cuts to commercial. I'm like, come on! I just want to finish this piece of... This movie... Okay, the plot. We're very famous on this podcast, Beth, for forgetting to talk about the plot. It's a paper-thin plot. Let's be honest. 14 girls. 3 of them basically band together with a dastardly plan to make Phoebe Cates cheat on her fiance so one of the other ones can hook up with her. That's not the actual plot, but that is actually the plot of this movie.
Yeah,
you're right. That is the plot of the movie. I mean, it's teenage girls who just graduated from high school in 1963, South Carolina, and they tell their parents they're going to Fort Sumter. But instead they go to Myrtle Beach for a lot of shenanigans and immediately end up on the Grand Strand, which is Ocean Boulevard, which was actually shot on Ocean Boulevard in Myrtle Beach. And I was just down in Myrtle Beach.
That's awesome.
And that's exactly because we used to go as teenagers when I was a girl. I'm still a girl, but when I was a younger girl. And that actually still happens, or at least it did in the 90s, where you would cruise in these traffic jams up and down Ocean Boulevard and like hang out the windows and talk to the boys. And the weirdest thing is, the first time I ever did it, my mom was driving the car.
Oh no.
We were all like hanging out the window and waving at the cute high school boys.
Did you experience them shaking
really
up
does
beer
happen.
bottles and spraying the car with beer?
Yeah.
Waving
great
Confederate
flirting.
flags.
You know, that I think that's why the movie isn't available, honestly, in more places, because the use of the Confederate flag is so kind of like ubiquitous, right, throughout the entire movie.
Man. I was 10 minutes into this movie and I'd seen so many Confederate flags that I was genuinely scared for when a black character was gonna show up. I'm like, oh no,
yeah.
But it did take full on an hour and 30 minutes for that to actually happen. That Ocean Boulevard scene, I was playing Where's Waldo for anyone that wasn't white, and I was like, I lost that game.
There was better flags than people.
I mean, and honestly, I think it's strange, like thinking back about growing up in the 80s in, you know, North and South Carolina. Myrtle Beach was our vacation spot. You know, when we were really young, we associated the Confederate flag with the Dukes of Hazzard. You know, it was on the front of their car, and the General Lee car. And I don't think that we were quite aware of how much that flag represented an absolute other ideology. So it makes me sad now.
It's shifted though. So that's the thing, is because it has shifted in the last sort of 15 years or so. That the shift has happened, that it's kind of like now it's seen with the negative connotation. Whereas when this movie was made, not at all. It was just representative of the South. Like you say, it's the generally. Have I ever told you my idea? If I ever win the lottery, I'm going to buy myself a 1970s Dodge Charger. I'm going to make it up exactly like the one from the Dukes of Hazzard, but I'm putting the Union Jack on top instead, and I'm going to call it the Generally.
Yeah.
Just generally.
That's the Generally.
Yeah.
That's actually
so
pretty
if I ever win the lottery, first thing I'm doing. The thing is, this movie, it was so funny because I was like, we're all like, we had a text thread going, all four of us. And I started watching Shag, and I'm like, guys, I'm 30 seconds in, and I think it's already a hate crime, because it's like, even the logo.
The logo, the logo has the Confederate flag watermarked in the background. You know what you're getting into. And,
this movie is sponsored by the Confederacy.
There's a number of Confederate flag bikini dances in this film. It's got it all.
Oh my God.
And it's a really weird bikini dance where she does like a split and waves her flags, and she has tiny little Confederate flags that she waves along with the flags. And I grew up in the South in beauty pageants, and so all of this maybe hit a little too close to home. And you know, I was a size 2 when they called me Pudge. So
this is the thing. I was watching this movie and I was saying the same thing, sort of like to Mrs. as well. But I was like, it's because, well, you know, this is very Bethel's. This is like, you know, she did, like, when I met Beth, you know, she used to do beauty pageants before she ran for office, before she got on television. You know, all of these accents. I was watching the movie going, oh, I can't wait to talk to Beth.
So at what point did you decide to get rid of your Confederate flag swimsuit?
I've never had that. I promise I've never had one. Or maybe my parents might have bought me one when I was a kid, but I have no memory of that. They did have like Dukes of Hazzard style floats that you bought at Wings at Myrtle Beach, and I had one, and it was like it was orange. It had like the Confederate flag on it, you know, and we're like hanging out in the pool and we're riding waves in Myrtle Beach. It was a thing that we just didn't have enough, I guess. And and like you said, Ollie, it really has shifted a lot, and like awareness of that has shifted a lot in the last decade and a half, last 2 decades. But thinking back about it now, and I know when you know better, you do better, and I know that you can't hold somebody to today's standards when they're in the 1980s,
right? But
it still feels uncomfortable, right? It feels like we didn't know enough, or that we weren't thoughtful enough, or that we weren't considerate enough, or that we allowed some kind of nostalgia to take place of the actual representation of what the flag was. Yeah. And there's something heartbreaking about that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's I think the Dukes of Hazzard had a big part about it. I think it's just that thing, you know, and it's like, you know, internationally, I'm like, I always knew it as that's the flag from that cool car in that awesome show that they just jump, and it's like, it's awesome. But
you're watching it through race-tinted glasses.
Right. I think the other kind of important thing to remember is, so this movie takes place in 1963, which would have been 100 years after the Civil War. So I think what you hit on with the nostalgia is, for that time, there was probably a lot of like, hey, it's the centennial since, you know, the
Yeah,
Civil
that's
War ended. And so a lot of that had probably started to come back, and just people not being critical
Look at
of it
you
at
with
all.
the highbrow
Oh, yeah.
history knowledge right there. I want to get to the shagging because
I did have a question maybe for Beth, like this whole Fort Sumter thing, like what is that and why is it such a hot spot for young women to go to Fort Sumter?
It is not a hot place for the young women to go. It is, I mean, it's the place where the Civil War started. And it is a beautiful, if you're a fort dork, which I am, my husband and I have visited like
Hashtag Fort Dork.
places. Hashtag Fort Dork. I actually got it. My husband proposed to me at a fort called what's called the Dry Tortugas off of Key West. Anywho, it's where because it's where the Civil War started, it is a place that people do enjoy going to tour. No young girl. That's why the parents are like, oh, we're so proud of our daughters.
Okay.
They graduated. They're going to soak in Southern history and the history of the Civil War. And they then sneak off to Myrtle Beach.
I love they get to that apex where it's the street sign and it just says Myrtle Beach or Fort Sumter.
That's the term.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I don't think that sign is actually real, although it may have been back then. Now there are some highways that lead to Myrtle Beach, but you used to have to take back roads. I mean, I was watching the driving and I was thinking, wow, that does look like what it felt like driving to Myrtle Beach when I was a kid.
Now, it's a ragtag group. We've got Phoebe Cates' character is the secretly wild virgin, which I can't wait to get into that one. Bridget Fonda is the preacher's daughter, which is just such a fantastic cliche, especially when she's like dancing with the Confederate flag.
Oh my God, it's too horny.
Between her legs,
flossing with it. Yeah,
I was genuinely fascinated by that scene.
It's very Papa Don't Preach.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, yeah. And then she even looks like Madonna or like Marilyn Monroe. She's got the little, you know, the birthmark.
Mm-hmm. And then you've got Paige Hannah is the conservative senator's daughter as well. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like it's a combination of like, you know, you take Dirty Dancing, you take a little bit of American Pie, and then you shake it up with some of that American Graffiti, and then just like throw it out there, and it's like, all right, there you go, we got ourselves a movie. Let's rock and roll. I have to be honest, I did spend quite a lot of this movie checking to see how long was left.
Oh my God. I definitely checked out 45 minutes towards the end of this film. I was like, but
I was all everything, in like, for Pudge's story.
Watching all of these movies, I kept preparing myself from like something really horrific is going to happen, like a sexual assault or just something like the way these characters are set up. And the movie just kind of ends. Like they dance for a bit and...
Hang on, you're skipping over at the beginning of the second act how Bridget Fonda goes off with some guy, and when he does try to sexually assault her, she is rescued by two women who then waterboard her with whiskey and assault her. And I'm like,
yeah, they're not rescue her. I don't think they were rescuing her. They were following her because they left with their man, and they just happened to carry 2 fucking bottles of shaving cream just in case this situation should arise.
And then to top it all off, she wins one of those girls wins the beauty contest. She's the one in the Confederate flag bikini who dances oddly.
Yeah, and her friend who's kind of but not really Rizzo from Grease.
Real.
Nailed
it's not actually Stockard Channing, but looks like her.
Yeah. So yeah, she's also secretly 40 playing a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
There was so many different moving parts. The essence of it is that kind of like Ryan, you mentioned earlier, that while they are cruising in traffic, this other guy, Buzz, great name, there's Buzz and Chip. They spent 5 seconds thinking about these character names. Yeah. But he entrances the ladies by spraying them with beer and then kind of harassing them, and they're like,
and it works.
I took in my notes. Another movie where men are horrible,
and the women can't get enough.
Well, and
I thought for sure. Go ahead. I thought for sure that Buzz was going to like be a murderer of some kind. Like he gave off such serial killer like energy at the very beginning. He's just dead-eyed staring at them. I'm like, this guy's going to be a problem. And then it's the rest of the movie spent time like trying to like walk that back and be like, oh no, this, you know, this guy, he's very sweet. Don't worry about it.
That's what I was saying. I kept waiting for something really bad to happen, although the movie was just so lighthearted that nothing super tragic really did, you know, like
It is. I mean, I can see why. Like, I can see why young teen Beths like this movie. I can see why girls of the South like this movie. I can see why it's a fun sort of like
fun.
watch. But at the same time, there are things that when you just sit there and think about it for a second, you're like, what? And
It's it's pretty low stakes, you know.
Like Phoebe, yeah, very low stakes in a way. But like Phoebe Cates' character, what I love, her journey is fascinating because she basically gets kidnapped by the other three. They lie. She doesn't want to. She's the one she's going to marry Harvey or something like that. It's something, right?
Huckley, I think.
Something.
And then
Harley.
And then she
Harley,
gets
that's
Harley, that's
ensnared
what it is.
by Buzz. And then it gets to this point where like they've decided to use the senator's house, their vacation home, for a big party, and she ends up on the boat with Buzz. And it literally to the point of like with the moment where she's like, it gets to the point of, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cheat on my fiance and I'm going to sleep with you. Is she has the moment where she just goes, don't tell anybody, and then that's it.
Yep.
You know what? Just don't tell anyone. Let's have sex. And then
maybe the least interesting character in this movie.
But then, well, because for me, the whole movie is about Pudge and Chip. But no, Phoebe Cates' character then literally 5 minutes after being deflowered, she's like suddenly she's got wild, crazy hair, and she's like, I'm wild, and I'm like, it's just unlocked all this latent horniness in her, and I'm like, dude, come on, you were like. It's been 5 minutes.
She goes from virgin to 100 in like one evening. It's insane.
From Papa Don't Preach to just actual Madonna.
But my favorite little side story is Bridget Fonda's character fawning over Frankie Valentine, the Rex Manning of their day, and they decide who's also like all these characters are very sheltered and kind of prudish, but so they're all through this movie they're all able to lash out and kind of explore. And they get him back to the house after this thing, and Bridget Fonda is fawning over him the entire movie. She does her showpiece where she's doing a Gone with the Wind monologue, and she comes down and she looks absolutely stunning. And Frankie looks at her and goes, "She'll do." I was like, Jesus,
what a charmer!
Christ. Jesus Christ!
Well, because it comes out that he's actually a bit of an idiot, and she realizes that the Kingmaker is actually the agent. So her whole thing is, I want to go to Hollywood, which is exactly the exact same, like you said, the exact same character trait as Dark Hollywood. But but Beth, I mean, like it was funny because we were live texting the movie, and you were like, oh no, is this like did you misremember the movie? Like, what is your rewatch of it? You know, how did that go for you?
I was really suddenly concerned that it was so hard to find that I was like, oh my gosh, did I really miss some horribly
a hate crime?
Just some horrible like race laden moments or racism. Did I miss? So I was wondering if I misremembered it because I saw it in the theater. I was 11 when the movie came out. But rewatching it as an adult, so the things that you guys are noticing about like Buzz and how the females were reacting, like as a woman who grew up in the South with a Southern belle of a mom who was a teenager in 1963. I don't know if you heard the line. There was one line where I think it was Pudge who said, if I'm not married by the time I'm 20, I'm going to kill myself. You know, like she had this kind of dramatic moment where the one thing that could change your lot in life was marriage, you know, and there was this real stigma with being an old maid. And I know that was even something that was communicated to me when I was young, because I remember when my cousin got married, I think she was 27 or 28. And I remember the chatter about it, you know, like, oh, she's finally getting married. And, you know, this is like the 90s. When that happened. And so I think that's why, even though these guys are they're spraying beer, you know, at the time, I think that there was this pressure on women to find a mate. And so they ended up enduring and putting up with a great deal of male behavior that now isn't acceptable. You know, that now that women have freedom to make their own money and have a whole different experience. And this is before the sexual revolution. This is before Roe versus Wade. You know, this is before the birth control pill, like all of those things. Like marriage was kind of the consummate thing. And in the Bible Belt, you were supposed to be a virgin till you got married. So, you know, in that moment where Phoebe Cates like she was deflowered by Buzz, and then she comes back and her hair is messed up and she's she's twisting her hair on her finger and says, like, it turns out I'm wild. Like, as a female in the South, when you make that decision to do that outside of marriage, there is a moment where you suddenly think I am in a new world. I have done something I was not supposed to do. I have broken my covenant with God. I have possibly ruined my life. But if you kind of enjoyed it, then you do have this moment where you're like, oh my gosh, it turns out I'm not the good girl I thought I was. And so I actually related oddly to her kind of saying that, because that pressure, even on me growing up in the 80s in a post-Roe world, that pressure was put on me. You know, I grew up I was supposed to be like Miss America. That was the path that my parents put me on. And when you're in that world, you have to sign a contract that says there's like a moral clause in it. It's like moral turpitude. You can't have had an abortion. Like there are all of these things that you sign away, and you can't be caught with alcohol in a picture and all. So I grew up with this fear that I wasn't going to achieve any of my goals in life if I drank, if I smoked, if I had sex, if I was around boys. Like there was this insane amount of pressure to be inhuman, honestly.
You know, it's funny you should say that, like, because I said this to Mrs. I was talking about this movie, and I said it's kind of interesting. The four main characters to me are more like, it's all the different aspects of Beth's personality as a young girl fighting with each other to see which one's going to win. It's like your id. And I was like, God, there's things, because there's all things that overlap with you in each of the characters that I was like, this is actually quite funny. I'm like, no wonder Beth chose this, because as a teenager, you were like, I'm all of them and none of them.
Well, and it's actually true. I was the girl who wanted to escape to Hollywood, which I did. I left after college. I made this kind of controversial speech when I was crowning the new Miss Raleigh, where I was kind of calling out the system for promoting eating disorders. And I said at the very end of my speech, like, this is the last time you'll ever see me in any kind of pageant context, but this will not be the last time you see me. Walked out of the
This one's for Pudge.
This one's for Pudge. And then I moved to LA.
And then you ran for office. You got the senator connection. You were in beauty pageants. You were like, you are all of these characters. It's insane. It's amazing to see how it sort of battled that. So Will, for you, Will, like Will is our resident, like massive. He is the man of movies. You know, as you can see, he's sitting in his movie kingdom right now. Will, how was your watch of this movie? Like, you know, when I'm always intrigued by your takes.
I'm kind of the same boat as Ryan is. I was waiting for something to happen. Like, I mean, like some big, like massive twist, like something to go really wrong. And, you know, but that just didn't really happen. It's almost like a slice of life movie. And for me, when we got to the party, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to lead us to the big climax. This is where everything's going to come together. And then the party ends and the movie goes for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what are we still doing here?
Yeah.
They had to win the Shag contest.
Yeah. Yes. But by then, like,
there was
cares?
a Shag contest.
Yeah, this whole movie rotates around this like dance competition, of course, which I'm sure was like a big deal. Like you go down there and it's the huge thing, and everyone's
just had
dancing.
it this past weekend in
Get out
Myrtle
of
Beach.
town.
It's called SOS, Shagging on the Strand, and they just finished it.
Well,
seriously, come on, South Carolina.
It's only gotten hornier since
I need one of those T-shirts. I need one of those T-shirts.
We've got to.
And I'm not gonna lie, I've done the Shag contest. Like I have shagged. I have entered a Shag contest. I have won a Shag contest. I was Punch.
Okay, we're getting a T-shirt made. Beth Troutman, champion shagger. There we go. Yeah. It's gonna happen. Have you shagged Beth Troutman? No, wait, no, that doesn't quite work.
The Shag competition winner 4 years running.
If you put a comma, have you shagged, comma, Beth Troutman? That works.
But
add it to the list.
I think Ryan, you nailed it when you said, you know, the thing about Shag is low stakes.
Yeah, it felt like a Dazed and Confused. Like I kept thinking of Dazed and Confused while I was watching this, but from a much like from a female perspective, which I really enjoyed. But it just doesn't have that like these little, I mean, it's got all of these little vignettes, but it just doesn't really culminate into anything. Even like the massive party that like switches off on a dime. Once that ends, I get that it's for the dance competition, and like each one of these girls has something going on with another fella. Like Pudge has Chip, who's like, I'm going off to the army, and I was like, and the whole, they have that adorable scene in the bathtub, and she's just, all she wants is for this dude to like make a move, and he fucking doesn't do it, and it's
well, he's just trying to be, you know, like he's learned the wrong lessons. He's just trying to be nice and stuff like that. I mean, I get what you mean, because you're right. I mean, all the pieces are there. I mean, much like when you get into Dirty Dancing, which we were talking about last time when we were all on the show, and that movie is amazing. I mean, that movie is amazing, but still, it's pretty low stakes. It's just, I'm on vacation. It's just a woman, sort of like a girl becoming a woman kind of thing. This is essentially the same movie, but when they kind of sort of put it all together, it's just like, you know.
Buzz is no Patrick Swayze, that's for sure.
He's no.
Like the guy is not super charismatic. I thought he was one of the garage boys in The Wraith. I had to Google it. I was like, this guy just doesn't look like a leading man. Like, but
this movie also felt like it could have been made in the 60s, and I mean that in like it just felt like an old-fashioned movie. Not just that they had said it in the past, like Dirty Dancing, which, even though that was said in the past, still felt like a product of the 80s, like with those sensibilities in there. This felt like they almost made this in 1963 and someone uncovered it.
I will say,
they're like, oh yeah, we didn't release this.
I will say that the soundtrack to this movie was incredible, though. Absolutely flawless. I had a blast listening to every song on this soundtrack.
I actually, I should have done a better job comparing notes, because I guess the DVD that I have has different songs than the version that's online.
I did hear about that. Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
the version I watched was on Dailymotion, so I'm sitting there going, was there even music in this? All I know is that Verizon's got a special offer going right now, and if you want to upgrade to your iPhone 15,
oh, hold on, let me leave real quick. I need to upgrade.
Then I don't know which version I watched, but it opens with the same opening track from Baby Driver.
Yes,
that was in mine. Yeah,
okay,
but
so
I think
some
of the other tracks in the movie, because of licensing,
right,
changed from VHS version to the DVD, which is the one I saw, and so it's not all the same songs.
Well, the one, I mean, then I assume the one I watched was ripped off of a really shitty quality DVD anyway. So I'm assuming the audio was, but I enjoyed it. Like, it felt very, like you said, much like, you know, A Dazed and Confused, it felt very period appropriate. Like it could be set in there. Like you get lost in this world in this time period.
And they all end up, I mean, they essentially, I mean, Bridget Fonda manages to go to Hollywood, right? Pudge figures out that she's not actually fat and ends up with Chip, who's a nice guy. Paige Hanaso, the senator's daughter, ends up hooking up with the fiance that's been abandoned because she's secretly already had a crush on him. And then Phoebe Cates, I can't remember. Does she run off with Buzz and just have wild sex? Is that the end of the movie? I'm like, I don't remember.
She becomes Sharon Stone's character in Basic Instinct 2.
There you go.
Connections. But I tell you what, I mean, okay. I mean, this was a weird watch. I will give it, but it's definitely not as weird as the weirdest watch of all of them, which is 1982 Swamp Thing, which this movie I can't wait to get into. I mean, I was taking pictures and sending it to you guys. Like I was writing all of this stuff down so I could just remember to remember it, because it's confounding. But the bit that confused the hell out of me is that this movie starts with an opening crawl that establishes that Swamp Thing is a character. And so I'm like, so I was waiting for Swamp Thing to turn up, and then they do his origin. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, you said he existed. So 30 minutes in, I've been waiting for this mysterious character to appear. And then I was like, okay, this movie already is driving me crazy. But the other thing is almost entirely shot on location in like a swamp. This must have been the worst.
Oh my God, it was horrible. I kept thinking that myself too. I'm like, it's just,
They're always
and the
basically knee deep in water for the whole movie.
And they set the movie, which I thought the movie was going to be also set in South Carolina, but it's set in like Savannah, Georgia, right?
Louisiana, I think.
Is it because all the helicopter says Savannah and
did it?
The boats say it too? I didn't know.
I
they never established where. Yeah, but you're right. You would think like a Louisiana for sure.
Well, I know that she was coming from, like the city, because when she is helicoptered in to the swamp, she's wearing high heels and
a pantsuit and
like blazer.
I was trying to calculate the Aquanet budget for this movie. It's got to be astronomical.
So much they couldn't spend it on the costume. Like
yes. Okay, so thank you, Beth. Is that the movie starts with an opening crawl that establishes a character that isn't established yet, and then Adrienne Barbeau's character turns up, and she is just an agent of some kind, and she is dropped off at a top secret bioengineering project that's never really explained, that has a massive budget, that's in the middle of a swamp for some reason. Everyone is tooled up to the nips. And then there's also like some random paramilitary group milling about in this same swamp that's trying to get into whatever this bioengineer. Oh no, I've gone blind. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm like just trying to figure out this movie is just like banging your head against the table.
But man, the first half hour of this movie is amazing.
It does.
The rest of it, not great.
I know I feel like the moment Swamp Thing shows up, the movie really takes a nosedive, because that suit is rough, and
it's like
Dick
a wetsuit.
Durock is doing his best, but man,
he went on to also play the Swamp Thing in the 2019 TV show that they rebooted. He was the same Swamp Thing. They brought him back.
Oh, was he really?
Using a cane?
Yeah. Swamp Thing's in a wheelchair.
Yeah. That was like a whole thing. They brought him back.
Got like a little walker. I'm coming for you.
Yeah. He's on like one of those little scooters that's motorized.
Somehow more intimidating than this movie.
Honestly, if he was coming through a swamp on one of those little rascals, I mean,
so at the beginning, they try and establish this. The doctor there played. The only time I've seen Ray Weiss not play a maniacal villain.
Yeah, not in RoboCop. Yeah.
Not in RoboCop or in Twin Peaks. He's just a nutball, and he's trying to. Let me check my notes here. He's trying to pull a spore sample off of a possum that has been submerged in a tank of swamp water for a shocking amount of time.
Okay, yeah.
That they then synthesize into this like neon green glow stick fluid.
He wants to combine. Animal and plant.
Yeah. That is he's trying to grow plants in places that don't normally grow. So like tomatoes in the desert, right?
I would give that movie credit in that exact moment, because I'm sitting there going, why the fuck would anybody do this? And they go, well, so you can grow corn and this, and so you can do, and I'm like, okay, fine. Thank you for your little MacGuffin explanation. Fine.
No, it somehow makes the world's most insane explosive. And they introduce his sister character, who's like, hey, check this out. And she just puts her hand in it and then splashes it on the ground.
Throwing it all over the place.
It's crazy. She doesn't get swamp hand.
It's insane. What's even more insane is this opening is pretty close to the comics. Like they did not change a whole lot of the origin. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've read like anything to do with Swamp Thing, but my memory of it is like pretty similar.
I mean, consider this is one of like one of the first comic book movies, right? I mean, was this before that crappy Captain America movie back in the day?
It's definitely before that, yeah.
82, right? I mean,
yeah, it's post Superman though.
Oh my god, post Superman.
Yeah. Honestly, so there's not that much. They don't get that much slack.
Yeah. So they went from Superman to Swamp Thing.
Right. So really, it's massive downgrade.
Like Wes Craven's like, I got this.
Yep. Was this his blank check movie?
Which, by the way, as I'm watching this, and I mean the script and the dialogue, like everything was so clunky and so bad. It felt like a high school film class project, like shot with a VHS shoulder camera. So I was thinking, all right, this is Wes Craven wrote and directed it. Like maybe this was his first foray into Hollywood movies. Maybe he was 22 and I'm going to give him some slack. So I Googled it. Yeah. He was 42 when he wrote this.
And this is like 2 years before Nightmare on Elm Street, right?
Well, and that's what he actually said, that was the only good thing that came from Swamp Thing for him, was that he thought of Nightmare on Elm Street while filming this movie.
It has like a rating of 60% on the tomatometer. That I was just like, which is how my wife says tomato meter. The tomatometer, I think that's the only way that I'm ever going to say it.
That's 59% too high.
Yeah, it's about, that's what I mean. I was like, I think you mean 6%.
Now, hear me out. If this was John Carpenter's Swamp Thing, we'd be having a very different conversation.
It
Yeah.
would have been a bit freaky. I mean, you know what? It's quite interesting, actually. Funny you should say that. Is that Adrienne Barbeau? She was one of the chesty girls from Cannonball Run. She's from Escape from New York, but she has also turned up in a bunch of movies that we're all familiar with, actually, as the voice of a computer. So she was the voice of a computer in The Thing. Funny enough, she was also the voice of the computer in Demolition Man and Judge Dredd.
Oh shit! And my favorite role that she ever played, Thornton Mellon's wife, Rodney Dangerfield, Back to School.
Back to School.
No one,
You're
nothing?
right.
Wow. Deep,
Movie.
It's amazing.
deep
Are you
cut.
kidding me?
Got
The
one of the-
triple
it's-
Lindy.
That's got one of the most insane jokes. And they're all at this house party, and he's with his wife, Adrienne Barbeau, and they fucking hate each other. And he's walking by, and a guy's admiring their painting. He's like, "Oh, Mr. Mellon, your wife was showing me her Klimt." And he goes, "Yeah, she's been showing it to everybody." It's just phenomenal. I encourage everyone to watch Back to School.
The thing is, right, so as much as like this movie is confoundingly just bizarre, I will give credit that Adrienne Barbeau's character is pretty cool.
She's
Like,
kind of a badass, right?
Yeah, I was saying, I texted you guys, I was like, Mom, can we have Ripley from Aliens? It's like, we've got Ripley Aliens at home. But I was like, but at the same time, she whipped out she grabbed hold of the M16 and she took out some of those paramilitary guys. She's constantly being caught and escaping. Like, these guys are terrible paramilitary. We've got her. Oh, she got away. We've got her again. Oh, she got away again.
The bit where she goes to like the general store with the little boy,
Dude.
and she steals the gun and she goes to fire it, and the gun, like that shot of the gun exploded. Beth, you're so right. It does feel like a student film, down to the creepy wipes, like the
wipes!
dissolves.
The dissolves that are like, what are they?
I don't know what they're doing.
Someone just discovered that they could do it, and it's like it was like they've never used iMovie before. They're like, why don't we use all of them? So it's like curtain coming down, curtain coming up. It's like a clock thing going. Sometimes it was just like some kid had cut a star shape out, and just it was amazing. That was
It's like
so
Wes
random.
Craven saw Star Wars, and he's like,
That's what I was gonna say.
I know what I'm stealing from this.
Oh, it's like Star Wars
Yes.
does it great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it even better.
I'll have more squiggles though.
You mentioned Jude though. Jude is my favorite character in the movie. Jude is the young kid that lives alone in the swamp.
And like runs a gas station that has a gun, and then they're only around each other for 5 seconds, and then he keeps showing up in random places, like, "Oh, I found you," even though that they've just dropped
the
her
geography
off like
of
800 miles.
the geography of this movie is a little strange.
He's definitely
We
like
all know like swamps are easily navigatable.
He's not
Nobody's
called
ever
pond.
gotten lost in
He's
swamps.
not called
before,
Pond
so.
Thing. This is a pretty broad area.
He's definitely like this magical little like character, isn't he? For sure. Just like, and he's always calling it as he sees it as well. That's why I like Jude. He was making me laugh, and he was definitely throwing game at Adrienne Barbeau.
Oh yeah.
I'm like,
from his first line, which is "Here comes trouble," which he then uses again later.
Oh, we haven't talked about though.
my God.
Is the one guy who's killing it in this movie, Louis Jourdan. I know him as the bad guy from Octopussy. I'm a Bond freak. I've never seen him in another movie, and he's basically playing the exact same character he plays in Octopussy.
And he reveals himself in almost a Mission Impossible style face pull off reveal that happened so quick that I had to rewind it. I was like, wait, it was unbelievable, flawless.
It was incredible. And Ryan, you are like me. I think you've seen the second one a whole lot, because it used to be on Sci-Fi Channel.
It was on all the
time.
Yeah.
And he's the villain in the second one. He plays the same guy.
Is he still Lion-O, but the rejected Lion-O from the Thundercats?
I honestly don't remember, because I've seen the second one so many times. I was like, okay, I was trying to figure out how this led into the second one. It doesn't really. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
The second movie is so radically different than this one.
It's way more fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, it's a comedy. Like the second one is basically like, we're not even going to try to take this seriously. Yeah. It's just, I think I told you guys like on their text thread, second one's directed by Jim Wynorski, directed Chopping Mall, which if you haven't seen Chopping Mall, it's close to my heart. It's, 80s mall slasher with robots. It's fantastic.
Oh, that old chestnut, that classic genre.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's truly amazing. But this one, I can't figure out like why they cast him again in the second, other than he's really good in this.
He's great.
Yeah.
He's fantastic.
I love a villain that just quotes Nietzsche, and
he's just honestly like, it's the strangest paramilitary group, because They also live in the swamp. He lives in the swamp in his like mansion, and he's also like guys, to celebrate the fact that we have figured out the algorithm, we're going to have a sexy party, and everyone's taking their clothes off, and I'm like, what?
My favorite part about that party is I know we're jumping ahead, but they're honoring their fallen soldier who, when you finally get to Swamp Thing, his only move is lifting these people up and then tossing them, and then they're toast.
Yeah, they're gone.
But what was the Jerry Curl guy's name?
Not Sylvester, not Rambo.
Cheddar. Chutney,
Cheddar. Yep, it was. I have no idea. It could
doesn't
be
matter.
His character's name was Ferret.
Ferret, that's it. I knew it
we
was
were close.
So Swamp Thing easily disposes of him by kind of pulling his hair up, but not out. And then he's just gone. And then they have this dinner party to honor his memory. And it pans over to an empty chair with a red bow on it and just a bunch of guns and an empty plate in front of the place setting. Like they're like, hey, remember this guy? Let's honor him.
He was definitely one of the worst, worst henchmen ever, because like I said, everyone's constantly escaping. It was a little bit like, like he was Rocky / Rambo, but he's had all the brain trauma of being a boxer. So he was a pretty slow kind of henchman.
You had Wes Craven's name attached to this movie, so I had weird expectations going into this, but it's as though this movie really was made for young kids, but not really, because it's kind of
it's aimed at kids,
right?
but it's made by the people who made the Friday the 13th movies. Like it's like if those people try to make like a Nickelodeon kids show.
Yeah, but
it's the same composer too.
Yeah,
it's the same composer for Friday the 13th.
And you're right there, because 80s movies, even for kids, did have a confounding amount of boobs in them. So it was.
It was a better time.
You. I loved this movie as a kid, oddly. Like we had a VHS. I think we taped it off of HBO or something.
They're coming for you.
Yeah.
When I was like 5, 6 with my little brother, we would watch it. And I think I remember when we chose this movie, I think I was texting you guys. I think I said, I think this is the first time I saw boobs.
Because I put it on the thread and I was like, it's like they got to that point in the story, like, how do we segue into the next act? I know, tits.
And this is definitely one of those movies, like we always say, that is best watched with like a group of people.
Yes,
it's such an enjoy. Like I was watching this time, wishing we were all watching it together, because it's fun to laugh at and throw spoons at your TV. It's just one of those. Get everyone together.
That's why I was texting you guys, because I was having that thing of like, I am enjoying the hell out of this because it's terrible, but like
it's so good.
I wish we were all drinking and watching this movie together. Yeah, it was so fun to just like pull apart. Not that you have to pull apart; it's falling apart. Let's be honest. The bit for me that I still like haven't quite figured out at all is why Arcane, that's Jourdan's character, Anton Arcane, like wants this thing, because he's seen what it's done to Ray Wise. It's made him a monster. All right, like nothing. Honestly, if I could have been Ray Wise or Swamp Thing, I'd probably go with Ray Wise. You know what I mean? At least have genitals. It would be one of them as well. That's a good point. But he's like, all right, I'm going to give it to Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno because there's the other slightly mentally deficient henchman that then gets poisoned and turns into. Guys, what? I mean, suddenly
like a monkey pig thing.
Yeah. So for you listening at home, the serum, as it were, essentially turns you into your true self. Beautifully done metaphor. So, for example, Ray Weiss he loves plants, so they turn him into a swamp thing. But the other character, he's kind of this. The villain even says it. He's like this mousy, weak-minded individual, and they just turn him into this Jim Henson adjacent.
It's like
character.
Something out of Labyrinth.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Labyrinth,
it's a mouse, kind of like a mousy rat.
Yeah, it was so peculiar. And then seeing what it's done to Swamp Thing and seeing what it's done to Bruno, the guy goes, "I know what I am going to do." He just drinks
keep doing
it himself.
a French accent. Was he French in this movie?
French. His name is Louis Jourdan. He's French.
Right.
He was just doing the English accent.
He started out as a British guy until he pulled his face.
That's
why I'm confused. Yeah.
But then he turns into, again, guys, I took a picture. I'm still trying to figure out. It was just, again, budget Thundercats. If they tried to make it in the 80s, that's kind of, he looked like Lion-O with a shit sword.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was kind
bad.
of a hulking like aardvark kind of thing.
what's
It was
his-
very strange.
But what's his point? What's his motivation? Why did he do it? Why does he want to kill Swamp Thing? Why did we have the fight at the end? And then I guess he doesn't die because you say he turns up in the sequel. Confounding movie.
So there is a brief little conversation that happens. He has the random like blonde assistant that brings him drinks and things.
That's definitely not his daughter he's sleeping with. Sure.
Right. So
Ivanka.
he has a random conversation as he's going through, the 6 notebooks, and he's realizing that one is missing, and he's telling her, I think it was when it had just been said between somebody that by the year 2001 there are going to be more than 6 billion people on the planet, which we know is true actually now. And she says to him, control the food, you control the world, you have the power. And he wants this to control where food can be grown. But then when he finds out that it turns you into your essence, he thinks so much of himself. He thinks he's such a genius that it's just going to make him smarter.
I thought he was going to
be more of a genius.
He was going to turn into just a massive throbbing cock.
like a big brain.
Yeah, just, I don't know. But I was on the edge of my seat. I'm like, oh man, what is he going to turn into? Because this guy's...
I love, Beth, you properly actually watched this movie and found a way to explain it as well. Congratulations. You're the first person in the history of the world to actually make this movie make sense to somebody.
Wes Craven didn't even get that. Yeah. And he wrote
it. Now, Beth, you've done the director's commentary, the commentary track for Swamp Thing. Is that correct?
No, that was The Notebook.
Same movie. Basically the same exact plot.
Yeah.
It was actually shot in the same area right outside of Charleston.
Yeah. They were such big fans of this movie.
Which, by the way, just a little tidbit about shooting in the swamp. They shot in the middle of the summer. So it was miserably hot. If you've been to the South, or if you've been to South Carolina in the summer, it's not only hot, but it's insanely humid. But the worst part is there were these caterpillars that live in the trees in the swamp, and they would fall onto the cast and crew and sting them.
Oh my God. That's the thing. I was watching this movie going, because I was thinking the same thing, this must be uncomfortable. I'm looking like they were never swarms of mosquitoes, which I'm sure there must have been. No one's really sweating as well. That I'm like, everyone looks surprisingly comfortable for what? I mean, so imagine that, guys. Taking 1, it's South Carolina. 2, it's summer. 3, you're in a swamp. 4, you're the guy playing Swamp Thing. So he must have come close to death many times during this movie, because I can't imagine, must have lost 10 pounds a day just in sweat.
He just became an actual Swamp Thing. Like, that's how he made it through.
The outfit, he looked like a Wish.com version of the Jolly Green Giant.
Yeah.
But with Snickers veins all over him. I
remember, and again, Michael Jackson knows.
Yeah. I grew up, I remember, if you were old enough, that there was a Swamp Thing TV show in the 90s, and that costume looked great. I remember, I distinctly remember that. It was really cool. That was back when they were doing a Beauty and the Beast show with Ron Perlman. They were just taking all these weird IPs and making them romantic TV shows. And I just remember that one, and it was good.
The one in the show and the sequel, the suit in the sequel actually looks really good.
Yeah.
So they figured it out after this movie, but this suit,
it was
like hot garbage.
It was a wetsuit that was spray painted green. It was terrible.
I tell you what, bad. Beth, you should go back and listen to our Hawaii episode, and then you need to watch a movie called Hard Ticket to Hawaii, because that is the movie that this movie should have been. It's the kind of movie where the 2 main characters, who are both identical blondes but not identical, to think better, they get in the hot tub, topless, and it's because that's, as I explained in the movie, that's where they do their best thinking. Yeah. But then it's got a B plot with a snake. That's what was missing from Swamp Thing, is they just should have said this is almost a spoof of itself and just gone, because Hard Ticket to Hawaii is basically porn with just the actual porn cut out. All the nudity is still there.
There is a bit early on in this movie where a guy pulls a snake out of his pocket and then it bites a guy right on the dick. And then my mind immediately went, I'm like, that snake has to be related to the snake in Hard Ticket to Hawaii. It just simply has to be.
Yeah. He pulls this snake
fucking insane
out of his pocket, and the snake bites the guy twice, and then he puts it back in his pocket. I'm like, how has that snake been in your pocket, bro?
Pocket snake, man.
Is that a snake in your pocket?
A real trouser snake, yeah.
It's actual snake in the pocket.
I couldn't, and they just glaze over that scene because it happens so quickly and so unnecessarily.
Well, and it's at the beginning. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the
right at
very
the
beginning of the movie.
It really sets the tone for the film.
It does. It sets your expectations, at least.
And then you have the immediate chemistry between Ray Weiss and Adrienne Barbeau's, like immediate chemistry.
It's
like
immediate.
they kiss on the mouth like right away.
Within
after
the
their
first
little
few
boat
minutes.
ride, he hands her a flower, and she thinks that his sister is his wife.
Yeah.
But then when she finds out she's not, she's like, okay. Mm-hmm.
And then
immediate open mouth kiss.
And then when he becomes Swamp Thing, he'll do whatever it takes to protect her. I'm like, there's maybe something that got cut out,
Yeah.
Some bit of swamp love that we missed. Though we do get you've been through all of this and you're being chased by a paramilitary force, and then but you decide, you know what I need to do right now is take a bath in the swamp. I need to get clean by taking all my clothes off and then bathing with from the belly button down in water, and then and just I love the way that she's putting water on her arms like she's never done it. It's like wow, and it's just like, look at my breasts.
I was waiting for her to get out just completely covered in leeches, like
Stand
By Me, because we just watched that and I was, oh my god, no, haven't you learned?
Dirty swamp water.
It's just I'm amazed at the end. It goes, she didn't die of dysentery or something like that. It's just like this is
kidding.
And Swamp Thing's just watching it and like, all right, okay, I guess we're doing a topless scene.
Now, Will, help me out here because you're a resident comic book expert. What are Swamp Thing's powers?
Oh, well, that's the ridiculous thing. Like when you watch this movie in the comics, he's got near infinite powers. Like it's ridiculous. He draws strength like from the earth. So like he's as strong as the earth, like potentially, and he can grow massive. He's made of plants, so he can grow like insanely tall. He's basically immortal. In order to kill him, you have to destroy the planet because he's like just that connected. So he's just invincible, like in the comics. And in the movie, they were like, okay, well, we can't, or in the movie, they're like, can't do that. What if he just like threw a boat?
Right. Or he somehow heals the young boy who is brutally murdered.
Right. Yes. I was
that's a new one on me.
So
I'm not familiar with that.
It was that scene. I'm so glad that they brought him back to life, because suddenly, did we just murder Jude?
I love the bit where
he's lying face down on that boat with his arms naked, and I'm like, oh my god!
I mean, it looks like he was bludgeoned, and then Swamp Thing like picks him up, gently caresses. He puts the glowing goo into his head and brings him back to life. But the kid has maybe the best line delivery of anyone in this film, where he's fumbling around. He puts his glasses on. He goes, "There goes the neighborhood." It's great. The only line he has
unfazed by coming back to life thanks to a swamp creature.
Yeah, and then
it's just like, all right.
I do. Also, my other favorite line is the villain, where he goes, "Bring me this swamp thing."
Yay!
We have a title.
And then like later he gets like, Swamp Thing also has to save Adrienne Barbeau because she gets stabbed in the boob, and that makes him really angry because he apparently really liked the boobs that he was seeing earlier, and says, I'm taking this guy out.
I like his bit of revolting where he has now the whole thing is the villain is trying to get the last issue of this journal, right? This last entry, and Swamp Thing has it, and he takes it and he just heaves it into. He does a back from whence you came and just throws it into the swamp, and then the henchman immediately finds it. It's just,
literally the next Bruno goes, I found the book.
I got it. He threw it right at me. God damn it! This fucking movie is so terrible. I love it.
This movie, honestly, this whole week, whose dog's barking? Is that yours, Bethel? You got dogs barking?
Oh my god! Yeah. I'm sorry. That's my neighbor. That's I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about it.
Don't worry about it. I was just like, where's the duck coming from?
That's my neighbor whose their favorite activity is leaving their dog outside for hours and hours on end.
That's right.
So wonderful people, let me tell you.
All right, well, let the dog in. It can join the podcast. Also, by the way, if you are listening to this podcast, we have also started our YouTube version, so you can actually watch the show as well. And the only reason I bring that up is because for this entire podcast so far, the sport for me has been watching Beth's face.
Right.
Through this whole podcast has been amazing. so if you want to have an extra show, make sure you find us on YouTube and just enjoy watching Beth just listen to this conversation.
We'll do a super cut of just all her reactions to our comments.
Just hiding under the desk. And
Beth, we might have to blur your face out for the YouTube episodes. So you don't get in trouble.
Oh my goodness. I tell you, it's so fun having Beth on the show.
All right, so Swamp Thing 2. Swamp Thing 2.
No.
I did have a good segue. I was watching because I watched this and our next film I watched Doc Hollywood first, thinking I'm like, this really looks, I know it's set in South Carolina, but it very much looks like a Florida Everglade type of thing. Whereas Swamp Thing looks like a Florida Everglade, but it's filmed in South Carolina, which is
that's a good point.
Jarring.
That's a very good point, because like I assumed that it was set in South Carolina because it's so very much shot there, but no. Kind of like Beth was pointing out, it's somewhere in Alabama, maybe
Louisiana. We think it's
something
somewhere.
like that. Yeah. But let's do it. Let's talk about the movie I brought. This is a movie that is very, very close to my heart. I love this movie. I love this movie. Yeah. It is. I love Michael J. Fox. But this movie, I saw it as a kid, and I was so charmed by the movie, by the people, by the story, by just this whole sort of small town America idea that I wanted to do this movie. This is one of those movies that when I said we're going to do this podcast, when we got to South Carolina, we were going to do it because I wanted to chat about it.
Now, Ollie, this is the reason you became a plastic surgeon in LA, correct?
That is correct. Yes, that is correct. It's 100%.
When I watched this movie through the lens of this was Ollie's story, and I'm like, wait a minute, you never had a Porsche, you lying piece of shit. So I'd never seen this movie, and
I was going to say, who's seen this movie before? Me and Beth.
I heard of it. I remember the trailer because there are bits in this film. There are bits in this film like I remember seeing that trailer.
The opening 15 seconds of the trailer is clips from Beverly Hills Cop. Click the trailer. Watch the trailer right now. Look up the trailer for you guys at home. Look up the trailer for Doc Hollywood. The first 15 seconds, all shots of girls in LA from Beverly Hills Cop when Axel Foley rolls into town. I'm like, you can do that? You can just steal from another movie?
Yeah, maybe I should watch Beverly Hills Cop then.
I mean, the RoboCop trailer.
Studio.
Where did that take place?
The RoboCop trailer stole the Terminator theme song, like in their first trailer. So
everyone steals theme songs. That's fine, but stealing actual shots from another movie and presenting it as your own, no.
But I'm upset that this movie kind of escaped my film range, just because I think when I saw it, when I was at the whatever age I was at the time, I was like, it just doesn't seem like something I would watch. But I'm so glad I did, because this had that like Ferris Bueller energy to it, where it's kind of a perfect movie. I know we say that a lot, but it goes down smooth, man. And plus, it's got Woody Harrelson in it.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the best line of the entire movie, and I don't know if you guys
wrote it down.
Did you write it down? You know what I'm going to say when they're at the cafe in California, and Bridget Fonda says, "Is that a star?" And Woody Harrelson says, "No, that's Ted Danson."
Oh, see, I thought it was the line that I text Ollie. He goes, "He's an insurance rebel with a clause."
Yeah,
I had to stop the movie. No, the
rebel without a clause. Perfect.
Yeah, it is.
I died at the Ted Danson line. That was so good.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm glad you bring that up, because I was watching this movie again, and I've seen it a bunch of times. I own this movie, but it's been a while. But I was laughing so loud, missus could hear. Like, this is an actual laugh out loud movie.
Real funny.
There are moments of that was actually really funny. And it's like, honestly, I think it's got a lower rating on the Tomatometer than Swamp Thing does. It's got like
no tits.
It's one of those.
Well, yeah. What do I say?
Yeah. It has everything.
It does. It also has swamp tits. Fine.
And she's bathing the exact same way.
Yeah,
it's kind of like she's just splashing water on herself.
One of the greatest character intros in history is Lou from Doc Hollywood. She just explodes out of the water completely nude, and then has all the confidence in the scene. And I'm like, has him completely on his back foot the entire time. Then I'm like, I was a teenage boy when I saw this movie, and I'm like, I like Lou. She's cool.
And even still watching it for this podcast, the same words came out of your mouth. I remember her. I think the first time I saw her, she was in Tommy Boy for me.
Tommy Boy.
That's what I remember her from. And I was like, oh shit, that's right.
And when you see them, you know, when they go out into the boat and the fireworks are going,
Yeah.
like, didn't you see the Tommy Boy scene where they were out in the boat and she's like, I know where your mother sleeps and I'm gonna like.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Oh my God, I didn't even make that connection. That's fantastic.
Oh, so we've done our classic thing of not explaining the plot. So if you haven't seen the movie Doc Hollywood, it's Michael J. Fox is I think he's in Washington D.C. actually, as like a trauma ER doctor. It's established right at the beginning that he's going to go all the way to California. He's going to basically cash in as a doctor. He's going to go and work for oh my God, it's George Harrison or something. Isn't
Oh
it?
my God. Oh no.
What's his name?
Oh, George.
The guy that's always got a tan.
The tan guy.
Yeah.
Oh my God. None of us could think. Like literally, I'm
George
trying to
Hamilton.
think.
George Hamilton.
Hamilton.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God.
But so he's going to go work in a plastic surgeon's place and just make a ton of money. And as he's driving in his classic 1960s Porsche across America to I am the one and
Why would he drive? That made no sense to me. Like
if you've got a 1960s Porsche, man, you're going to take it with you. What are you going to do? Leave it behind? No.
But he was going, to be clear, he was going there for a job interview. There was no guarantee he was getting this job.
Yeah, but he's that confident.
He's confident.
He is Michael J. Fox. He's got that Michael J. Fox energy.
He's like much like Tom Cruise, the most confident hobbit in the world. You know. Just, okay, Will's face was good for that one. But yeah, so he's there's a big traffic jam. He cuts through and basically ends up in an accident that destroys the fence of. Correct me if I'm wrong. The second week in a row we've had this guy. Kevin McAllister's neighbor from Home Alone.
That's right. Famous Bigfoot enthusiast from Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah, from Close Encounters is back once again, and its thing is that. So basically, he gets given. It's the if you've ever seen the animated movie Cars from Pixar, it is the exact same plot. A guy that's moving sort of too fast ends up in a small town. The judge gives him a job that he has to basically stick around and work for the town. And while he's there, he ends up falling in love with the charm of the town, but also gets charmed with the small town big city girl. Which it is the exact movie Cars, just without a NASCAR race at the end, basically, and more tits.
Yeah,
you know, because there's definitely no boobs in the movie Cars, which is a shame.
I love the small town feel of this. You kind of get it. We did Grosse Pointe Blank. It's just got that very small town. Everyone is a character, and everyone is incredibly charming. And this movie, I had a smile on my face. Well, I mean, I'd never seen this, but I knew every single beat that was going to happen. But it still didn't make this any less enjoyable.
Right.
I think my favorite small town moment is when he first gets his sentence and the mayor, or he goes into the little cafe, you know, the mayor's like giving him the tour and they're trying to convince him to be the doctor, and they offer him $27,000 and they get up to 35 and they're like, well, that's a vote of the entire city council. All in favor, say aye. And they're all like,
I abstain.
They're all sitting there. But I grew up in a small town in the South, and this felt exactly accurate. Like it just felt, it felt right.
I mean, I love that, you know, because like Ryan can be sometimes a tough nut to crack, you know, so I got that.
I hate everything. I go on record, I hate everything.
New York skepticism. And but the thing is, this is exactly what happened when I watched this movie. That I was completely charmed by it.
It's so charming, yeah.
And it's like, but no joke, is that like Beth's saying, is like, you know, it does feel very real, and it's like no joke. I do live in a small town in Texas, but in the American South. But for this very thing, I watched this movie and I was like, that seems nice. That seems nice. Where, you know, a little place where everybody knows everybody else, and it's just you have these little parades and stuff. So they have the squash parade. You know, because that's the thing. I mean, like, no joke. One of my best mates come from this town in Oklahoma, which is the hay capital of the world. And every year they have hay day, you know, and they have the hay princess and stuff. It's just so actually accurate to the way it sort of is that you can understand, you know.
When you first meet the mayor, he's dressed as a giant squash.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, normally you get a movie like this with a mayor, we're introduced to the mayor and he's kind of a dick. This guy is great.
Yes.
Lovely.
There's
like
no
when
one.
He's walking home with him, and the lady's like, "Hey, Mayor, can you tell me if my ribs are
sweet.
done?" And your fire's too hot. Like you've got the fire too high. And
he's got such
so
a great
cute.
laugh too. That wheezy laugh. We're talking
Yeah,
about
that's
David
great.
Ogden Stiers plays the mayor, and there's also the great character as well is Barnard Hughes, the guy that plays the crotchety doctor. My favorite part is where
Grandpa from
comes by and
The
like
Lost Boys.
Michael J. Fox is gonna like crack this kid open, and he's like, "Just give him a Coke," and he comes
Yeah.
by, he's like, cracks the open, he goes, "That'll be 75 cents." I love that bit.
Oh, that was great. That whole thing. I mean, that's the first instance where you get him like being like switching on and being like, okay, I have to, because he was getting ready to clock out and getting ready to leave, and then they come in and he switches gears and he's doing everything he can to help this poor boy. Think because he hasn't been getting a hold of the doctor. He thinks this guy's a flake. He thinks he's old. He thinks he's dumb. Whatever. And he's like, no, I got to do this. And the doctor comes. He drives in his Cadillac and he's like, what are you doing? You took too much of this. Here, drink this Coca-Cola. You'll be fine.
You know,
I was going to say, one thing I really appreciated about this movie that I really, really liked is he is a good doctor. It's not just that he's like a hot shot, like, I know what I'm doing. He, like you said, when he switches into gears, he is a great doctor. And he's just like that throughout the movie.
You get that
emergency
early
comes up, he goes right into doctor mode. And I think that really, you could have written this character to be kind of arrogant, maybe even like a Dr. House kind of thing. Yeah. But they didn't write him that way. They wrote him like, no, we're going to treat it like he's a real doctor. And I really, really appreciate it.
It's hard to paint like Michael J. Fox as like any, like you were saying, in any kind of smarmy light, like any time you play, except maybe in Mars Attacks, which is great. But he's a very well educated, like he knows exactly what he's doing, and he does have a bit of an ego, but because it's Michael J. Fox, it just kind of wears down your it just wears you down.
Well, you say not smarmy, and I agree with you because it is Michael J. Fox, but there is a sort of 15 minutes in the movie where he is actively trying to bone Lou for a bet with the mayor. And he's laying it on pretty thick. And I think he's kind of charming with it. She's like, oh, you're just trying to charm me out of your panties. Oh, no, that's another thing. And he's like, you can meet me later. Panties are up.
Until he finds out she's got a kid. And then he's like, never mind.
That kid never features again in the movie, by the way. Just rocks
she's
up.
at the dance. She's at the fair. Like she shows up for a second.
The pig gets more screen time than this child.
The pig does get more screen time.
And I love that everyone he gets, which is an insane twist of fate. So we got to go back because like Will, like you were saying, he's a phenomenal doctor. And they tell you that because there's this incredible montage of all of the patients he's interacting with in this town. You've got the patients that come in, the woman's pregnant, but they just want him to read the letters. Pakistani? It's amazing, which cleverly comes up later in the movie when he gets to Los Angeles. He's in the cab with the driver who's crying emotionally, and you're left to assume like, is this the guy? Like, they never confirm it. They never confirm it, but I love that. I thought that was so great.
I thought that's one of my favorite parts. And then he just gets into it, and they're like sucking on lollipops, and he's like, "Well, what happened with Ellen and the Pakistani?"
It's so good.
And it's like, it's the other part I really like as well is that the crotchety old doctor who has his own medical emergency, Michael J. Fox helps him out. Yeah. But it's like, as much as you think he's sort of crotchety, is that moment where he goes, "Here's my legacy," and he opens up the wardrobe, and he's like, there's not a single person in this town that I didn't bring into the world. Like his Nurse Ratched, whatever her name is, was like, she bit me on the way out. There's some foreshadowing there, kind of thing. Like, it's got so much heart, this movie. Yeah. It's just dripping through at all time. There is no, like the big, like you were saying, is like you kept waiting for the shoe to drop when we were watching Shag. And like in any movie, like in this one, you're kind of like, all right, what's the shoe going to drop? But it's really just he decides he's going to go to Hollywood. It's not really, this whole thing, everything's sort of working. He tries to sneak away at night, but there's that couple, the one that we've been learning about, the Pakistani friend, and suddenly they're having a breech birth, and he sacrifices his Porsche to this truck driver who
fell asleep at the wheel.
But they've not even left town, and they've got to go how far? And he's falling asleep just as they're leaving.
It's been a long night, man. He was also the carny operator, so he's had a day.
As Woody Harrelson is just,
oh my god, the best,
shooting behind his head, shooting behind his back.
That seems. I thought Woody Harrelson's got this like. This movie subverts your expectations in some ways. You think he's going to get into it with Woody Harrelson, and in a way he kind of does, but Woody Harrelson's so like nonchalant and cool about it.
Is that bit? Yeah. Michael J. Fox is like, are we ready to go? And it's like, you're kind of paranoid.
Yeah, it's great.
It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, that was my favorite line where Michael J.
love
Fox is like, I don't quite understand what's happening right now.
Yeah, and he kind of looks exactly like Mickey from Natural Born Killers. He's almost the same character.
He has
weirdly.
the same glasses pretty much.
It's not a complete when he shows up at the end, I'm like, oh, that's natural. Like he was on set for Natural Born Killers. Like, yeah, I can pop into this cafe. And
this is a prequel to that movie for sure. This is what happened to that character.
Can you imagine
afterward.
if Bridget Fonda was in Natural Born Killers instead of
Juliette Lewis?
Julia Lewis. It would have been a very different film.
That would have worked.
Anyway.
Sorry.
I love this movie so much.
And me too. I mean, the thing is, I'm the one talking about this movie, like sort of inspired me. But one of my very good friends here in Texas, we were talking movies. He's a doctor, and I mentioned, Doc Hollywood is one of my favorite movies. He goes, "That's my favorite movie." I went, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's the movie that made me want to be a doctor." And he is.
Wow.
It made
That's
him
incredible.
a doctor. It's like, and it's kind of that for the same thing. It's like and he was talking about this the other day, and his wife was a doctor as well. We're friends with both of them. And it's like his wife runs a practice that is kind of like inspired in that same way, and that instead of running like 100 people through a day, it's like, no, we have 12 people and we learn them and we learn their names and we talk to them and understand them. And it's like, and care for them and he's like, he was talking just at dinner the other day, because I mentioned we were doing it this week, and it's like, he was saying, yeah, the lost art of the house call, when you knew everybody, you knew the people. And it's like, and I think that's kind of what the underlying part of this message of this movie is the one is the slow down. But two, it's like we've, in a world where even now, put the internet into it as well, but where just everything's so big, and I've lived in all these massive cities, and you feel like you're just lost in the sprawl, that when you actually slow down and meet your neighbors and actually get to know people and get to know the town, it's got this quaint sort of sense of community that at the same time, I tell people, yeah, go out and explore the world, but it's nice also to have this place to come home to. Because I've bounced around the world my entire life. I don't really have a home. And so I've been a year now in Texas, and I go to the Friday night football games, and it's like you go to the parades and this kind of thing of this sense of community. And it's like, all right, yeah, there's a real charm to that, and that's what this movie shows. It's like, it's not looking down on anything. It's not looking up on anything. It's just presenting it as, hey, what if you just got on with your people and your neighbors, and that was your life? I'm like, well, that's not terrible.
Yeah, when you find out the after that night where his car is trash, you find out the entire town chips in to buy him a plane ticket, and it's like, this movie is it's saccharine. It's so sweet.
Yeah. And
then he gets to LA and it's fucking miserable.
Yeah, I mean, you got that shot where they're all there gathered, sort of waving him off.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's the town. They do that exact same shot in Cars when he's on the race and he tunes out and he pictures the entire town just looking at him like, we love you. And it's this movie, you're right, saccharine is the word, but I'm like, give me more.
Not about, yeah, I didn't mean in a bad way.
Hit me up with some insulin and give me all the sugar, baby.
Like I often say, it did nothing new, but it did everything really well. It just felt like a warm blanket.
Bethels, you've seen this movie before, right?
Yes. I saw this one at the theater as well. And having grown up in the South and having grown up in a small town, I love this movie. And I live in a small town now. I live in a suburb north of Charlotte, and we go to the little downtown festivals, and we know all of our neighbors. And we do, we cook for each other, and, I take them pies and we borrow things, and it's a whole feeling. But I think the moment that I really love in this movie, and it's such it's not part of it doesn't make a difference in the movie itself, but after the crotchety doctor has his heart attack and Michael J. Fox saves him, and then he's in the hospital bed at the hospital, and the next day, and all of the people from the town are there to visit him, and they've brought pie, and he then throws it away. Michael J. Fox throws it away. But I think about those kinds of things. You read articles about people who work at the end of life with people, and having done that with my mom, you think about what really matters in those moments. And I know it wasn't the end of his life, but it was a shock, and it could have been. And, everybody gathers. And at the end of the day, that is really it. That's all that matters. And that's what I think, Ollie was saying, when you really do slow down, because I've lived in Los Angeles, and I lived in Phoenix, and I lived in Fort Lauderdale, and these big kind of sprawling cities. And when you really do slow down and take a deep breath and focus on the love between people, that is the only thing that really matters. And we don't do that anymore. And people don't in general take the time to do that. And so that's what makes this such a lovable, lovely feeling movie, because that's possible. It's just we don't do it.
You reminded me just then, actually, because see that scene when like all the grandmothers, the various sort of like
at the beginning,
they're probably like the widows, I suppose, is the way, there's the three ladies that are just living together at the end of life kind of thing. They've all turned up with their baking. There's the one that goes, I don't cook. But like it's the bit right at the beginning when they're like, Ben Stone, like, come stay in this this place right here. And as he's dropping them off, there's the three ladies and they're stitching their blanket or whatever. And I love the bit that the mayor goes, oh, there's three of them. One of them's horny, but I'm not going to tell you which.
Yeah.
And so when the mayor leaves, and then there's two, and then there's the one at the front going, would you like a cocktail?
Yeah.
I laughed so hard at that.
Perfect. Yeah, they were great. And for some reason when I saw this, I'm like, did the four of them just like live in this house together? Do they live with Michael J. Fox in this house now? Is like that their life?
They dropped by, but I guarantee all those ladies live in a house. That's
They're the welcome wagon.
I joke about, because my missus always talks about this. So she talks about in the future how she's going to live in this sort of like house with her best friends. Like all the ladies are going to live together, and it's always like I never feature in any of these stories. And my daughter goes, "Yeah, it's kind of sad." Like, Mom's always sticking around talking about this future that you're not in. I go, "Baby, I must be dead or something." I'm like.
Well, statistics say that we will outlive you guys as women. So, because I have the same plan with my best friends, we're going to buy a plot of land and build like 3 or 4 tiny houses around a pool. And if I don't show up on the front porch by 10 a.m., come check on me and make sure the cat hasn't eaten my face.
It's a pretty solid plan.
Yeah, we have the same thing. We call it Friendship Row. That's where we're all going to end up living. And that's like, but the thing, that's exactly it, Beth, is that you realize, same thing happened to me. I spent 16 years running in one direction in television. And then like when it came to an end, came to a stop, I came to Texas, and it's the first time in my life since I turned 18 that I've slowed down. And it does give you this whole interesting perspective. And to think that it's just this quaint 90s movie that we're talking about with Michael J. Fox, but it does have this massive heart to it. And that's why I love this movie so much.
The Michael J. Fox movie, because I mean, he had a run of similar-ish movies to this, and the one that was on HBO for me all the time. Yeah, it was that one, and then the one where he wants to be the hotel owner. Is it For the Love or Money or something like that? I think it was For Love or Money.
Yeah,
which I absolutely fucking love that movie. It's just you're fast talking Michael J. Fox, and he's got dreams of building a hotel, but he's so damn charming in these movies that like I love.
He's maybe, I mean, we like Back to the Future is a movie we talked about. It's like, there's a list of perfect movies, and I was watching the great behind the scenes, of course, the famous part that it was he came in to replace Eric Stoltz because it wasn't working after 6 weeks. And every time, when I watch movies, the reason I love movies so much is they make me laugh in the same places, they make me cry in the same places, they make me so happy that I'm smiling so much that there's tears running down my eyes. Last night we were watching The Martian. That's another movie I consider a perfect movie. But I've lost track. We were talking about I've lost track.
Michael J. Fox being charming.
Michael J. Fox being charming. I had a point. Oh, I've lost my point. But I'm talking about that there are, when you're watching these perfect movies, it just elevates it all. You know what I mean? It really does take you to this whole place, and it makes you feel.
Are you doing your Nicole Kidman AMC theaters monologue?
Yeah,
right now?
I do.
This is why we go to the movie. Yeah,
this is. But this is why I do this movie podcast, because it's things like this. Because Doc Hollywood is a movie that to me it makes me happy. It makes me feel happy.
Now, when you had heard for me bringing movies to the table, when you had heard that Will, you hadn't seen this either, right?
No, I hadn't.
Yeah, so when you find out that Will and I have not seen this movie, and you're watching this again, with that in mind, you're watching it weirdly through our eyes, even though we're not all together watching it. It's such a fun experiment, thinking what are they going to think about this?
Part of me, a little bit, said, like Ryan, you've got you've got.
It would have destroyed you if I hated this movie.
If you'd hated this movie, I don't understand, and it was just this little thing of you just wrote, I'm watching Doc Hollywood, and then 25 minutes later on the text thread, you go, I'm just so charmed by this movie. I was like,
it's amazing.
And my barometer for the way you can tell if I like a movie, so watch this movie for the podcast, immediately went to Amazon and bought it on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
Just instantly, I was like, "Yep, I need to add this to my collection." It's just that good.
Oh, I love you, Will.
Yeah, that was just that's how much I was like, I'm gonna watch this like 100 more times. This is just great.
All right, so
this seems like a movie that was on all the time too. Like,
yeah, I mean, I
just never seen it. You know,
yeah.
As a kid, all right. So all right. Let's from that point then. Seeing as we've all agreed that Doc Hollywood is a treasure, and if you're at home and you haven't listened to this, sorry, haven't watched this movie, you should watch it. It's lovely.
Lovely.
So we've got to get into, you know, the reason we do the podcast is why is which one of these movies is the most South Carolina, and it gets a little bit interesting because I mean, one, you've got Shag, which is completely shot Myrtle Beach and Florence and Georgetown. It's like it's full on South Carolina movie set in South Carolina, fully South Carolina, even with like Confederate flag South Carolina. It's all happening. You've got Swamp Thing, which is entirely shot in South Carolina. But the thing is, like, you never even think about it. So let's just pretend it's set there
just
as well.
a swamp.
Yeah. And then you've got Doc Hollywood, which is shot in Florida. It's near Gainesville, I believe, is where it was shot. But very actively, you know, set in South Carolina. When you're in they're talking about it. Grady, you're in the courtroom. You know, and they've got the accent, all that kind of stuff going on. And it, for me, feels very like Beth was saying. It feels very authentic. That if you've ever lived like that. So where do you guys want to kick off? Because Shag's got a lot of South Carolina. It's dripping.
Yeah.
It's frothy.
I'd like to point out that you in our text chain wrote, "This might be too South Carolina."
It's like,
oh wait. I think I might have said that.
Did you say that?
I think
Did
I
you
might
say
have
that?
said that. I might have. I definitely thought it during this movie. This might be a little too South Carolina, but I mean, I know we say that, but like, and yes, there are Confederate flags everywhere, but there are no, to be clear, there are no like racial overtones,
none at all,
in this movie at all. There's just Confederate flags, which at the time we weren't
meant you're in
as
South
cognizant
Carolina.
of them. Yeah.
Well, there is wait, maybe I'm getting it confused. This has a black maid in it, though, right?
This did have this. The only real black character in the entire movie was the maid working in a house. But Swamp Thing, pretty much the only black character in Swamp Thing was Jude, the young magical boy who lives there, and Doc Hollywood as well. Like I said, I love the
nurse,
and the mechanic,
the nurse and the mechanic.
Yeah,
and
I love
the mechanics.
The two of them. Fun. I love those guys.
Yeah,
but they're like the rapping bees.
Yeah, the rapping bees.
Oh my god!
But the fact, and it's that shot where he's like, I can't sort of pay, and he turns around, but he's in the bee costume. So it's like this this shot. It's really well framed. I love this movie. It's a treasure.
Well, that character is introduced when the car wrecks and he's sitting there with the Porsche. He's like, "Where's the engine?"
It's great. Yeah, that's so fucking funny.
It's like, gotcha.
I love the two of them are great.
That's
what I said. Every character in that movie is just utterly charming.
And because Ryan was worried because right at the beginning he goes, oh, it's like because there's the character like the I Abstain character. And he's just, he's very well, but he's obviously gay, right? And so when it first turned up, Ryan was like, "Oh, here we go."
No, that's not even what I was referring. I know what you're talking about, but no, that's not even what I was thinking about. It's when he first meets the three old gals. They're like, "Oh, you're young and cute, and you're a doctor. How come you're not married?" And one of them just says, "Like, oh, maybe he looks for love, like that,
the love that we dare not talk."
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh, already?"
Yeah, but that's the thing is that when it comes into it, it's like you realize it's a really accepting town of just everybody's just friends. I'm like, that's again nothing. So to get back to what we're trying to do, the South Carolina of this is we have our relative. Our resident Carolina expert here is Bethels.
Yes.
Where do you lean on this one? You've seen all three movies now. Which one makes you feel the most familiar?
Yeah. On a scale of 1 to Swamp Thing.
Well, and the crazy thing is I saw all of these movies as a young person. I grew up with all three of these movies. However, I hadn't seen Shag as an adult, so it was weird to go back and watch it as an adult. Shag is very South Carolina in its promotion of the dance. That dance is incredibly popular here. We take shag lessons, like we have a lot of people know how to shag, and it's something you do at weddings, and you do it after the wedding too, Ollie.
There's your soundbite.
But I'm gonna have to, even though this was shot, and I'll tell you the town that it was shot in, it was like Mechanipe and McIntosh. I wrote it down in Florida, right outside of Gainesville, and the one town actually only has 1,000 people in it. Doc Hollywood feels the way my heart feels about growing up in a small town. And I know that small town South is imperfect, and it's imperfect because it's made up of people, right? But it feels the way my memory, which we remember things probably far more flowery and beautiful than maybe they were, but it feels like what it felt like in 7th grade to be at the town fair and to, go to the little local barbecue joint, and you knew the waitress's name and she brought you your order before you ordered it, kind of thing. And I loved that it transported me back to that feeling. So I have to say Doc Hollywood, even though I'm mad it was shot in Florida. There are plenty of cute towns in South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, because I mean, literally, to go back when we were talking about Shag, you have lived some of the scenes from that movie.
Oh, yeah.
To the point like you're like saying, no, I've literally even done that. And I think that just leans into the sort of the charm of Doc Hollywood, because I mean, that's the thing, because I remember when I said I was going to do it and you texted me, it's shot in Florida. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, but I know it's going to win. Because this movie is going to charm the pants off everyone.
I was going to say
until Swamp Thing came into the picture.
So good.
I was watching. I'm like, I want Doc Hollywood to win, because that is, like you said, my ideal vision for what I think that feels like. I always go based off feeling in these movies. I don't care where they're shot, but if it's shot in the state, that does help. But I want this. I'm going to go with Doc Hollywood because that's what I feel is the most South Carolina. Like, I want that. It's so ideal of what my vision of it would be.
Will, your Swamp Thing?
Obviously Swamp Thing. It's just I think we're all on the same page. We're all in the same swamp on this one. No, I'm totally on Doc Hollywood. Like, like I said, I just instantly fell in love with this movie, the moment I saw it. And I had avoided it for a while because the poster, with Michael J. Fox, he's got like the sunglasses and the babes. I was thinking this was like a secret to my success, which is like, hey, what if greed and all that is good, actually? Like, don't even think about it. I thought it was going to be like one of those movies. Yeah, but then watching it, I'm like, oh, this is just excellent. I just love everything about it. So, and I think this has that small town feel. Yeah, I say that living in Los Angeles, literally. Yeah. Where I live is literally that plastic surgeon's office with the gals behind the frosted glass, who like every 10 seconds
he's like
pose.
They make it seem like he's going to play golf like between every patient he sees.
He's like taking photos of himself in every
fucking crazy
sculptures. With the fat sucking thing.
Oh, God. You can see, like, to quote Joe Bluth, he's like, I've made a huge mistake just seeing him in that office. Just like, what have I done? It's great.
I'm so happy. I mean, the thing is, like I said, I do feel like I may have stacked the deck. I definitely knew I had an ace in the hole with this movie. And it's also like, I've talked to the guys as well before when we were doing the Wyoming episode, is that when the idea of this movie sort of like this podcast popped into my head is because, I didn't move to America until I was, 32. But I was raised on American movies. So for a lot of these movies, like when Ryan says, when we come to a sort of a state, I instinctually pick a movie that I pick the movie that taught me about that state in my head. The movie that whenever I think about like this, I immediately think of that movie first, because that's the way I grew up. I was obsessed with America. I was obsessed with them, like, Hollywood. And this was the movie that when South Carolina. So I knew that when I came up with the idea, I was thinking, well, Close Encounters, Wyoming. Okay, that would work. South Carolina. All right, Doc Hollywood. All right, there's more than just California and New York. This idea would work. So this for me is a movie that I've loved since the moment I saw it. So I'm so happy. So we're agreeing. This is a unanimous. All right.
You can't now. Just don't think you can't pick this one also for Washington when we do Washington. You can't double. There's no double dipping.
It's Florida. So the official movie for the United States of Movie Podcast to represent South Carolina until such time as we go to Swamp Thing 2 or the sequel to Shag, Shagging More. It's the movie that defines South Carolina as a state. Now, before we move on, at this point, we like to talk about the also-rans. Beth, you had a long list. You talked about The Notebook already. Any other South Carolina movies? I mean, Ryan, before we started recording, what were you watching at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Days of Thunder.
Days of Thunder.
Well, we mentioned that for North Carolina. Like when we search for movies that take place in like South Carolina, it still pulls up North Carolina movies. So I was like, oh shit, Talladega Nights. Like, because I remember we talked about that for North Carolina.
It's because they were both shot at Charlotte Motor Speedway which Charlotte Motor Speedway is actually in Concord, my hometown. But it's called Charlotte Motor Speedway. And then it's also shot at Darlington, and Darlington's in South Carolina. So that's why the two. But the one that I think is really random is James Cameron's The Abyss. I mean, it's so random that it was shot at like this abandoned nuclear plant, if I'm not mistaken, in Columbia, South Carolina. And it was all done there, which is such a cool thing to me. But
that's awesome.
I mean, The Notebook, I recommended that one just because it was shot in Charleston and right outside of Charleston. And the only scene that took place, they shot it in January, which is weird because it's supposed to be this like southern, like summer love thing, but you can tell they're blowing cold breath as they're talking throughout the entire movie. The only thing that wasn't shot in South Carolina, it was because they had to do a reshoot, is the beach scene, which is shot on a beach in California. And I always thought it was weird because there were rocks on the beach in that scene, and there are no rocks on any beach on the East Coast, really, or at least the Southeast. But those were the.
I love it. Guys, any other movies?
Those were two of the movies that are weird.
I was saying if we didn't pick The Notebook, our listeners would fucking riot.
So what did we do? We didn't pick The Notebook.
Yeah. We chose the riot.
We went with Swamp Thing.
Yeah. I think we had talked about Glory, which I'm perfectly happy to do because I love that movie. But also I think I kind of want to say that for like when we come back around again. I thought that movie deserves a little bit more.
Thrown around as well, wasn't it?
Patriot,
which is a big, which depicts the British how they are. I'll say that 100% accurate movie.
We're the best. I think that's what I like is that, very often we finish our debate and we go, oh, but what movies could we bring to dethrone it? So I'm like, you're right. I mean, Glory. Bethel's have got one.
Well, and Prince of Tides, Barbara Streisand.
Oh, God. My mother's favorite movie.
It's also shot in South Carolina.
Ooh, yeah, that's interesting. All right.
That's why I love talking about this podcast with other people, and they're like, oh, well, what movies did you pick for this state? And they just rattle off movies that I didn't even think of. It's so fun.
Well, that's why for the people at home that have been reaching out on our Reddit, that have been reaching out on social media, Facebook, things like that, the people who are watching these movies with us, is send us ideas. We love it. Underneath the comments in my videos, people are always saying, oh, when you get to this state, you've got to do this movie.
Yeah.
When you get to that state, do this movie. We really, really do enjoy you guys joining in on the conversation. It does inspire us to then dig deep and pick things like Swamp Thing to really educate you guys on amazing movies. The last thing we had to do, right now, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that notifications button, subscribe to the channel, tell people about us. If you're listening to us on your podcast, rate, review us. It really does help us. Tell your friends about us. Don't forget, we also have some merch that's now available. You can find a link on our Facebook and our Reddit to Ryan's designs. We have to put together a shagging Beth Troutman t-shirt.
Yes.
That's going to happen. Yeah. I can't wait. Beth, as well, you are a treasure. You are such a movie nerd that I don't think I want to limit you to just the Carolinas. You're welcome back on this show anytime you want to come play.
Call me anytime because I am a movie nerd and I am the person who watches it with director's commentary, and I will go and visit the houses that were shot where things were shot. And I'm a goober.
You are our goober, and we love it. So the last thing we have to do, fellas, is to figure out where we're going next week. Interesting.
West Carolina.
We're gonna go. There's this movie, this state actually. I mean, there's one very obvious movie that is the one that and I think Iowa. I always think this movie, but I was getting into it. There are some really good movies set in the state of Iowa. So we are going to Iowa next week. So get your thinking caps on. We'll get there. I'm sure the text thread's going to blow up in about 15 minutes time as we start doing our Googling. But with that, to everybody else at home, thank you very much for watching, for listening to the United States of Movie podcast. You can find me online, Ollie_Pettigrew, or That Englishman in Texas. You can find Will as entitled Willennial. Like I said, you can find Ryan's designs on Threadless, Rhino Digital, RYNO Digital. And Beth, you've got your morning show in Charlotte, Beth and Bo, right? Oh.
Yes, Good Morning BT. It's the #1 show in Charlotte. You can find us on, if you want to, anywhere in the world, you can listen to us on WBT.com. But if you're here in Charlotte, it's 11:10 a.m., 99.3 FM.
Ooh, look, she even did the radio voice while
Flawless.
she was doing it. It was awesome. Well, with that, guys, thank you. What a great week. As always, brilliant movies. I look forward to seeing you guys next week to get in this conversation. To everybody else at home, thank you for joining us for this episode, United States of a Movie Podcast.